in this, for all of which we strive to continue to bring you the authors you love and their work to the Politics and Prose community. If at any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat to purchase the author's book, Tax the Rich. There you go. It's on the Politics and Prose website. Additionally, you can ask our guests a question by clicking on the Q&A button, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. And while we will try to get to everyone's questions, we apologize in advance if we don't have time to address yours. Finally, we want to thank you for being here with us today. We are so thankful to our family of loyal customers and new friends for keeping our business and our spirits afloat. So it is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's guests, Mr. Morris Pearl and Erica Payne of the Patriotic Millionaires, and Mr. Michael Isikoff, the Chief Investigative Correspondent from Yahoo News. So the Patriotic Millionaires is a group of hundreds of high net worth Americans committed to making all Americans better off by building a more prosperous, stable, and inclusive nation, and ensuring that millionaires, billionaires, and corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Morris Pearl is current chair and former managing director at BlackRock. Erica Payne is founder and president of the Patriotic Millionaires, and she is the author of The Practical Progressive and the co-author with Morris Pearl of Tax the Rich. A graduate of the Wharton School, she also lives in Washington, D.C. And Mr. Michael Isikoff is the chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News, where he is also editor-at-large for reporting and investigations. He digs into national security, money and politics, and whatever else strikes his fancy. Mr. Isikoff has written 2 bestsellers, Uncovering Clinton and Hubris with David Corn, about the selling of the Iraq War. So Tax the Rich was published with the New Press, a not-for-profit book publisher with a public interest mission. The New Press publishes books that explore issues that affect us all, and its authors provide ideas and inspiration for activists, teachers, policymakers, and everyday citizens who are working to defend and promote democracy. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Mr. Morris Pearl, Ms. Erica Payne, and Michael Isikoff to Politics and Prose Live.
Well, thank you, and it is a true honor to do this event with the authors of this really fascinating and timely new book, Tax the Rich. I'd like to start out by, when I first moved to Washington many years ago, the most powerful figure when it came to tax policy was a senator from Louisiana by the name of Russell Long, who was the all-powerful chairman of the Senate Finance Committee for many years. And he used to have a mantra by which he defined tax reform. And that mantra was, don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax that other fellow under the tree. It strikes me that our authors are the living refutation of Russell Long's saying. Morris, you are a really rich guy, former managing director of BlackRock, and Erica, you run an organization of really rich people that includes Morris, and your goal is to tax yourselves or tax the members of the Patriotic Millionaires. I want to explore your reasons for doing so as laid out in the book. But let's start out. I mentioned the book is really timely because just today, as I was preparing for this event, a notification popped up on my cell phone that the Biden administration is considering raising the capital gains tax to 39%. That's nearly double from what it is today. Erica, it sounds like some folks in the administration are reading Tax the Rich and following the prescription that you lay out in this book. What was your reaction?
Oh my gosh, we couldn't be more thrilled. Michael, thank you so much for being here. And just a quick couple of thank yous. Thank you to Politics and Prose. What an institution in Washington. I have a 5-year-old, and taking her to Politics and Prose for the first time was just, just a wonderful experience. What a great bookstore. And also to the folks at the New Press. Michael, we kicked off we've always been, we're about 10 years old, the organization, and we have always been oriented around taxing the wealthy, but we kicked off a really, really robust campaign about 2.5 years ago with a conference called Tax the Rich, and Diane Wachtel, who is head of the New Press, came up to us afterwards and said, you've got to turn this into a book. And so we just didn't even know what to do. But what we tried to create, Michael, is a handbook, really. It's filled with cartoons and pictures and graphs. And we hope we've written it in a really entertaining prose, but it's critical for people to jump into this debate. And we wanted to give them a way to do that without having an accounting degree. So the book, as you said, I think is very well timed. For the first time in years and years and years, we have decades even, we have a real public commitment from the administration to correct the wrongs of the last several decades in tax policy. The issue, Michael, that we focus on is the idea that the economy has really been rigged through the tax code. About 70% of Americans think the economy is rigged against them. They're right. How do you rig a tax code? I mean, how do you rig an economy? You start with the tax code. And so Biden is coming in and correcting some of that. And one of the big pieces that we talk about in the book is this differentiation between what you make and how you're taxed working at a job, and how you're taxed if you're just sitting in your apartment doing nothing. So Morris and I work for a living. I have a job with the Patriotic Millionaires, and Morris works with us, but we don't pay him any money. And so he lives off of his investments. And just to give you a sense of the differentiation, if I made $100,000 last year, working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and Morris made $100,000 last year with a light little click on his E-Trade account, because of taxes, I end the year almost $9,000 poorer than Morris. And so the Biden administration and what they put out today, their plan is to equalize ordinary income, which is money from a job, and capital gains income, equalize the tax rate on those as it should be, because the differentiation between those two tax rates is what is creating ultimately the social unrest that we're suffering today. We have created a political economy that definitionally leads to unequal outcomes. And these are leading to unequal outcomes that will become more unequal more quickly over time. So we're more unequal today than we have been in 100 years. And a big part of that is because when you make money off of your money, you pay less taxes on that money than people who actually work for a living. I'm thrilled to see Biden address that today.
So, Morris, you would be the target for people for what the Biden administration is trying to do here by jacking up the capital gains tax rate. So you made, as I understand it, a bundle of money during your years at BlackRock. How much would what Biden is trying to do cost you, and why are you still in favor of it when you're going to lose a whole bunch of money if these tax proposals actually go through?
Well, of course, it's not just me. If it was only my personal money we were talking about, I could solve that problem without any legislation. It's the fact that I want a society where my granddaughter has the kind of opportunities that I did growing up when she's growing up. And we can't have that if we have a few rich people and lots of poor people. That doesn't work. They tried that in South Africa a few decades ago. It did not end well for the rich people, as you might recall. So we need a system that's sustainable. We've got millions of Americans who feel like they're being treated like second-class citizens, and it's because they actually are being treated like second-class citizens. We need to lessen this inequality that's making our country unstable. And I mean, obviously there's other things too, but we have to make things more fair. So we don't have the rich people getting richer and richer and richer and richer, and everyone else just kind of not really quite getting by. It doesn't work. So we have to equalize things for people. And yeah, I might be worse off financially over the next year or something, but I think over the long run, I think we're all better off if we have a more fair and just society. I really believe that. I think everybody should be on our side of this.
Okay, but as you both know, the political hill to climb here is pretty steep. And yes, you know, the role of lobbyists in being able to manipulate Congress and the tax code is a big part of it. But let's just take today's news. Right after that Bloomberg story broke with the news about the Biden administration considering this jack up in the capital gains rate, the Dow tanked more than 300 points. And that's the kind of fears that raising taxes like this create in the market. And yes, we can say, look, predominantly or disproportionately that affects really rich people like yourself, Morris, but it also affects a lot of other Americans. I mean, I think the latest figures, I think, are about 52% of the American public is invested in the stock market. That's not all rich people, obviously. That's a lot of middle income people, a lot of people who have, 401ks, and they don't want to see their holdings shrink in that way. So how do you go about dealing with the kind of fears that people are going to have about the prospect of raising taxes?
Well, that's a ridiculous argument. The Dow Jones Industrial Average went down today less than 1%. Okay.
Well, it was the first day that the news broke.
Huge increase over the last year. Those of us who are invested in stocks are hugely more wealthy now than we were a year ago. The stock market has gone back to the level that it was in last week. Okay. There's no reason why stocks are worth less because somebody may change the tax rates. Those companies that are making money that our stocks are based on are going to make just as much money regardless of what the tax rate is. If anything, people might want to sell their stocks now and buy more stocks to take advantage of the current low tax rates before the tax rates go up next year. But it does not reduce the value of American industry. It does not do anything of that sort. There's no reason why I will stop being invested in the stock market. I mean, I could, I suppose, sell all my stocks and take money and stick it under my mattress, but that will not get me any return at all. I'm much better off investing in the market and paying a tax rate that's a little bit higher than it was last year on the profits I make, rather than making no profits at all. So no, I believe that's a completely ridiculous argument that the stock market
but I think my point is, and I'd like to bring Erica in on this, is the politics of it and the optics, because there are it's not just people like yourself, Morris, who are invested in the stock market, who have something to lose when it goes down. It's also those millions and millions of Americans who are not especially obscenely rich, who don't own yachts and private jets, but do have their 401ks, who are worried about financing their kids' college education. And when they see the idea that the stock market might go down as a result of a big jack up in the capital gains rate, that's going to make it politically harder to sell. So, Erica, what are you going to say to those Americans who are not rich about why these kind of tax increases should go through?
I mean, Michael, the fact that you're pulling the stock market into this, I think is absurd on its face. And it's part of the, I mean, I'm just going to back up Morris. You know, the fact that we sit around and talk endlessly about what is happening to the Dow when it has literally no effect on 50% of the population. Let's start there. Number one. Number two, say that I own a company stock and my stock is going up. So that could mean a couple of things. That could mean that I've innovated, developed a new product, have perfectly happy employees who are fulfilling, you know, who are bringing all kinds of innovation to the company and all of that. That could be why my stock is doing well. What could also be happening and my stock is doing well is that I laid off a bunch of people. I started putting inferior products into the market, and I increased the amount of advertising that I'm spending to people. That may short term make my profits go up and make my stock price go up. But over the long term, you're not building a strong economy. And the fact that Maria Bartiromo and all the rest of her Wall Street money honeys want to sit around and act like the stock market has something to do with regular people is an absurdity. And journalists should not buy into that. Okay, number one. Number two, the pollsters, the leading pollsters for Joe Biden have determined that Democrats should go out and talk loudly and proudly, quote, go on offensive on taxes. They've discovered that his infrastructure plan is more popular by 10 points when you tell people that corporations are going to pay for it, because people have seen corporations and millionaires are getting away with murder. Billionaires paid a lower effective tax rate than regular working people last year, Michael. This is not a sustainable economy. Okay, so the stock market dropping a few points to what it was last week, I mean, get over it. And first of all, our elected officials are supposed to have a little bit more sense than to feed into nonsense like that. And then you said K Street is going to come in and manipulate them. This is not a matter of manipulating. This is a matter of paying people off. The lawmakers, 100, almost 200 CEOs came out against Biden's corporate tax increase. I would like to see the $5,000 PAC checks flowing into Washington right now. We have the tax system we have right now because we have a corrupt campaign finance system. And journalists should be very, very wary of talking about the stock market and equating it to the economy anytime they are trying to talk about bringing more fairness into this country.
Okay, I don't think I was equating it with the economy. I was trying to make a point about the political obstacles that you could face. But Morris, Erica,
there are no political obstacles. The American people are sick and tired of corporations and millionaires getting away for murder. And the political party that addresses that problem is going to gain political power in the years to come. People have had it.
Morris, there's a wonderful anecdote you have in one of your chapters in this book, because Erica mentioned the campaign finance system that we have today. And you write about being at a fundraising cocktail party for a U.S. senator who you don't name, although I'm going to invite you to do so on this in this conversation. And this senator says to you how happy it is to do events like this because he gets to talk and hear from real people. Tell us about that event.
Oh yeah, I'm right over here. Overlooking Park Avenue. We were at a cocktail party, and the United States senator stood up and said, "Oh, it's a good thing I'm not a self-funder like this other senator is, because like events like this, I get to meet regular people." And I thought, you were at a party where a bunch of people paid over $1,000 each to have a couple of minutes to talk to you, nowhere near your state. And the person's since retired, it doesn't matter who he was, and you think we're regular people. And like, there's something wrong with that. And that's the heart of the problem. It's not that these people are evil. It's not that they're like selling their votes, for money. It's that they spend all of their time talking to rich people, raising money, and they don't have any time to talk to anyone else. And so they become intimately familiar with the frustrations of being rich, whatever they are. And that's, after a few years, that's like just part of their thinking process. It's like if you spend so much time talking to somebody, you eventually believe whatever they're telling you. And that happens to some of them, even the best of them. And that's the problem with our system. That's part of what they're trying to address in HR 1, that we won't have a system like that if we have campaign finance reform. So they don't need to get a bunch of money from a bunch of rich people. So that's what we are hoping for.
And Michael, I disagree with Morris on this. I mean, Morris is so much nicer than I am about the motivations of these people and how much, the money is a direct payoff for this and that. Look, money has flooded the political system. The people who have money are millionaires and corporations, and their obligation and responsibility to this country has gone in one direction in the last 70 years, and that's down. The top marginal income tax rate after World War II was 94%. Today it's 37%. Corporations used to bring in 30% of the revenues. Now they bring in 7% of the revenues. And to add insult to injury, not only are they paying off the lawmakers, so in Morris's estimation, they just get a little time to convince them. They get the time to convince them, and then they get a whole bunch of money to help back them up. So, I mean, look, Jimmy Carter said that the U.S. Congress was an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. I mean, this is, you can't dispute the fact that the money people are standing at the drawing board, drawing the economy that works for them. And that starts with the tax code.
So the title of your book is Tax the Rich. And, one thing you do in the book is address who is rich. And the benchmarks you use is you're rich if you make $1 million in a year, or if you have $5 million in assets. Now, let's address the second one, the $5 million in assets, because, given the way the stock market has increased over the last, few decades, with a few bumps in the road, but it's certainly been roaring over the last few years, pretty much. And real estate prices, let's say if you live in the zip code around politics and prose, you likely have a home that's worth at least $1 million or close to $1 million. If you've worked for most of your life, you've got a 401k that might be $500,000. If you've got a spouse who's also worked, you're up to $2 million there. I mean, and if you have other savings, other assets, you're going to get pretty close to that $5 million trigger. I don't know. Do you have any idea how many people fall into your category of rich?
We're talking about less than 2% of the population. And yeah, I think the guy who's...
I guess I'll bet though it's gone up over the last few years.
It probably has. But the person who saved up $5 million worth of assets in their portfolio, whether it's their 401k or their taxable portfolios, they are relatively rich, and they can afford to pay a higher tax rate on their income above that. We do have a progressive tax system. So we're not saying that suddenly once you cross the threshold that all of your income would be taxed at a higher rate. We're saying that if you get up to $1.1 million a year, then you'll pay a higher tax rate that lasts $100,000. So yeah, people who are up to that level of making over $1 million a year in profits, yeah, I mean, they are the people that are doing quite well.
Yeah, well, I was thinking more of the assets because it's the and or for you.
Michael, it's the difference between, look, and we talk about this in the book. Okay, if you own a home that's worth $1.5 million, and you have $500,000 left on your mortgage, and you bring home $350,000 a year, you and your spouse, congratulations for your success. We have no interest in taxing you. If you make more than $1 million a year, we would like to tax you additionally on every dollar you make over $1 million a year. And if you have $5 million in assets, we would like to tax you on the amount above that. We have no interest taxing somebody at $999,000 of income, and we have no interest in taxing somebody who has $4 million of assets. And in your $5 million house, if you owe $2 million on it, you don't have $5 million of assets. You have $3 million of assets. If you own your home flat out, or if you have a $10 million home and you owe $3 million on your mortgage, then yes, we think you should pay higher taxes.
What is your recommendation of what the personal tax rate should be for somebody in the highest income category?
So we have laid out that we can release later, but I mean, essentially we want to see the $1 million. So right now, Michael, the highest marginal tax rate is around 37%. It's for incomes at 622,000. Okay, so you pay that percentage if you make 622,000 or you make 622 million. We believe that there is an enormous difference between 622,000 and 622 million. And so we want to end what we call the bracket racket. Okay, politicians always come in and say they want to simplify things. And what they typically mean by simplifying things is they want to reduce the number of tax brackets. Well, it's not particularly difficult to like punch your number in and find your taxes. So they're not doing anything simple. They're just trying to say philosophically that they don't think that anybody should pay more than 37.9% of their income in taxes. We just disagree with that. And there's a concept that if I could emblazon into everybody's head in America, it's this concept of the marginal utility of money. That essentially means the slight increase of utility, of use that you get out of each dollar subsequent to all of the ones that you have before. When you have no money, $500 is a big deal to you. I could hand Morris $500 tomorrow and he probably would not notice. Okay. The people that we are talking about taxing have an enormous amount of money. And as they have more and more money, that additional money is of incredibly limited value to them. The analogy we use in the book is pizza. Say that you haven't eaten all day. You're starving to death. You know, somebody brings you a delicious slice of pizza. That first bite, so delicious. Second bite, finish that up, you feel great. Somebody brings you another piece. That piece is very important to you as well. You're still kind of hungry. Now somebody brings you another pizza. You're like, that's great. I'll put some in my freezer. I'll have it for later. Maybe I'll have another piece for a late night snack. Now somebody brings you 1 billion pizzas. Okay, the 1 billionth pizza is less important to you than the first slice of pizza. So if you have 1 billion pizzas, we want to tax you more. We want more.
But you say more. I think my question was how much
90.
more?
We want to
90%.
90% tax rates on incomes over $100 million. Yes.
Morris, what would be the impact of going to a 90% tax rate for the people in your income level?
Well, first of all, there's a tiny number of people at that income level.
Yeah.
You know, I can't even think of anybody who's at the income level of making that much money, because even the richest people among us don't have very much income. The people like Mr. Zuckerberg and Mr. Bezos, who are the richest people in the world, don't have that much income. They're rich because they own huge amounts of stock in companies that are doing so well. That's part of the reason we need something like what, you know, Senator Warren is talking about in terms of a wealth tax on wealth, because those of us who are most wealthy don't pay effectively any tax at all in our tax system that's based all on income tax. Regular middle-class Americans, they've been paying a wealth tax for years on most of their wealth because they live in those houses near Politics and Prose that are worth $1 million a year and have hefty real estate taxes. The richest among us, they don't have a wealth. They don't pay any tax at all on the vast majority of their wealth and the vast majority of the money they make, because it's all in terms of unrealized capital gains, which are not taxed under our income tax system.
Right. I mean, one of the things you do in the book, quite well, is lay out how all these giant corporations, Amazon, Delta, on and on the list goes, Netflix, aren't paying any taxes at all. How is that possible?
Well,
Go ahead.
Martha.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. So the corporations, the rate is currently 21%. It used to be 35%. Biden wants to raise it to 28%. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. Okay. The thing that Biden put out that the corporations are freaking out about is about like a page or so that explains what he wants to do to all of these corporate loopholes. Let's take a company like Starbucks. Okay. Starbucks sells an enormous amount of coffee in the United States, has thousands of stores, has a few stores in Ireland. What the Biden administration, the loophole they're trying to close is that Starbucks of America can take what's called intellectual property. It's not a building or something like that. It's a logo. So picture that little mermaid lady. Okay. They transfer ownership of the logo from Starbucks of America to Starbucks of Ireland. And then Starbucks of America has to pay Starbucks of Ireland a whole bunch of royalties to use the logo. Well, the company can use the can set those royalty payments at anything they want. I mean, they're essentially dealing with themselves. So they set their royalty payments at a level that means that effectively they show all of their profits in Ireland, none of their profits in the United States, when any logical person can figure out that they do most of their business in the United States rather than in Ireland. They do that. I mean, they're just, they're just kind of manipulating around to pretend they're doing business somewhere they're not doing business. That's the bulk of what needs to be addressed in the corporate tax code. And that's what the corporate heads are flipping out about, because they have been hiding. Last year, it was 55 companies. In 1918, I think it was 91 companies. If you buy a toothpick from Amazon, you paid more taxes than Amazon paid. That is appalling. And it's fixable. That's the thing. It's fixable.
Yeah. You use the phrase tax loopholes, and often that's in the eye of the beholder, because there's a lot of tax breaks in our tax code that are there because there were perceived benefits from doing so.
For example,
the mortgage interest deduction, right, was put in there to help encourage people to buy homes, to afford homes, because it was viewed as a positive good to have more homeowners. 529s for saving for your college education. That's a tax break for families who are trying to save money to send their kids to college. There's one that really leapt out at me, and I want to get both of you to talk about this because it's very current right now. And that is, we now have a $7,500 tax credit for electric cars, right? And there's actually a whole trade association that's been formed, the Zero Emissions Transportation Association, which includes companies like Tesla and Uber that are lobbying for more tax credits for electric cars. Now, electric cars are pretty expensive. They're more expensive than gas guzzling cars. You can pay up to $70,000 or more for an SUV for an electric car. Now, the supporters of that say, look, yeah, tax policy and equity is really important, but climate change is the existential threat to our country. So therefore, that's more important right now. And that this kind of tax credit for Tesla, owned by the guy who's now actually the richest man in the world, according to some estimates, Elon Musk, should be getting this tax credit. How do you address, Morris, people who point out, people will point to examples like this and saying, yeah, some of these tax breaks are for positive goods for society?
Well, as you said, every one of them was put into the tax code for some reason. And I have no problem if the government wants to subsidize electric cars by $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever it is. We're not talking about people making decisions about $5,000 and $10,000 and $20,000 decisions. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars. That it's the people who are making millions of dollars that we think are hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars paying a lower tax rate than they should. So no, I mean, I'm honestly.
Do you want to do away with the tax credit for electric cars?
No, I don't.
Care
I
one way
don't
or
put it
the
one
other.
or the
I
other.
mean, Mike, we have no opinion about things like that. The mortgage interest tax deduction, we don't care. We are talking about people who have $1 million of income or $5 million of assets. The mortgage interest tax deduction is kind of a silly deduction. Okay, all it does is encourages people to buy bigger homes. So, you know, in my, you know, out at a cocktail party, I might say, hey, Michael, I think that's a dumb tax loophole. We plan to spend absolutely 0% of our time working on that tax loophole because we are only interested in taxing people who make $1 million of income or $5 million of assets. And this is actually a big dividing point in the progressive community, and where we split to an extent with the Biden administration. When we started the Patriotic Millionaires, I was circulating a letter when President Obama was going to cave to Republican demands in 2010 to extend the Bush tax cuts, circulated a letter at this $1 million, $5 million level, and a whole bunch of progressives called me and fussed at me because they thought that people who made $250,000 a year should pay higher taxes. The Biden administration has said very clearly they only want people who make $400,000 to pay higher taxes. You know, people can have different opinions about this. Our opinion on this is that until you tax people at $1 million and $5 million, you just shouldn't deal with anything else. And a 529 deduction or a mortgage interest tax deduction is just not in our purview of what we feel like dealing with. What we feel like dealing with is stuff like the stepped up basis, where if Morris buys stock for $1 million and it raises up to $10 million, and the day before he's going to sell it, he dies and leaves it to me or his kid only pays taxes on the value above $10 million. All of that gain is wiped out when it transfers to another person. That is absurd.
So we're talking about the fact that we think that some people are paying millions of dollars less than the fair amount on of their taxes. So we're not concerned about the $10,000 and the $20,000 deductions that regular middle class Americans who are working for a living are getting. No, that's not the problem. The problem is these things like the stepped up basis and the carried interest loophole that people are getting millions of dollars of tax benefits from.
Let's go back to, and by the way, I want to remind people that if they have any questions that they'd like to ask our authors, just go to that Q&A in the bottom of your screen and type it in. And in a few minutes, we will start taking questions from the audience. Let's just go back to the corporate tax issue. Your book does a great job of just sort of laying out all the incredible ways corporations avoid paying taxes. One that I love is the double Irish Dutch sandwich. Morris, you want to tell us what that is?
Well, what we're talking about is just ways in which the corporations move their money between different countries and end up claiming to each country that the money was really made somewhere else and they don't owe any taxes there. Not in Ireland, not in Holland, not in the United States, not anywhere. I mean, that's what caused people to be marching in the streets in London just a few years ago. And Starbucks just decided, oh, we will be paying some tax in the United Kingdom after all. Why not? People are not putting up with this stuff anymore. People are getting angry.
I'm sorry, Morris. It just, these corporations make me crazy because the thing is, Michael, they not only spend all of their money lobbying and putting campaign contributions in, they also go on these absurd media junkets to try to convince decent, hardworking people that they are worth listening to and are trustworthy. Okay. Randall Stevenson, the CEO of AT&T, was one of the biggest corporate cheerleaders for this huge rewrite of the federal tax code in 2017. He insisted that the correlation between tax cuts and job creation was very, very tight. Okay. And as the head of AT&T, if you're just an average Joe sitting there and he tells you that that's going to help you have a job, then maybe you do listen to him. Well, Randall Stevenson is lying. Randall Stevenson, from 2008 to 2015, AT&T paid an effective corporate tax rate of 8%. The statutory rate at the time was 35%. According to Randall Stevenson's logic, during that time, he must have hired several people with that low tax rate. Well, he didn't. He laid off 80,000 people. And what did he do when he got the 2017 tax cut that he lobbied for, that he sold to the American public with a lie? He laid off an additional 40,000 people. The CEOs of these companies, when they go out there and tell you that a corporate tax rate is good for you, they are lying. It is not more complicated than that.
But the corporate tax issue strikes me as complicated because you get countries like Ireland, for instance, that have far reduced corporate tax rates than we do, even with the lower Trump administration tax cuts that were put in. And so isn't the problem that we need some sort of, international treaty here, or some sort of, agreement that, because as long as you have countries that have steeply lower tax rates, American corporations are going to find ways to try to take advantage of that. Just like within the United States, companies try to take advantage of those states that have much lower tax rates than other states. So how do we address that problem?
Well, there is a point there. That's what the president and Secretary Yellen were talking about the other day in the Oval Office. Then this race to the bottom is a problem. Now, most corporations can't easily move, but some can, and some can kind of pretend to move, whether they do or not, that have intellectual property. And yeah, they are proposing an agreement through the OECD to sort of end this race to the bottom and have a universal minimum tax for corporations. But in the meantime, I think we have to do here in the United States, our country, here in the United States, I think we need to establish some minimum corporate tax rate, that money made in the United States has to be taxed in the United States, even if you come up with some intellectual property scheme that kind of lets you have some legal fiction that it was really made in wherever.
All right. Well, we do have a bunch of questions from the audience, and if others want to weigh in, please do. But let's go to them now. Erica, I'm going to address this one to you because I have a feeling you'll have some very strong opinions on it. Here's from somebody who labels themselves an anonymous attendee. I am all for taxing the super rich billionaires more. However, my husband and I came from lower middle class families. We got good educations, worked hard, saved for 40 years. We paid our taxes on our income. What is the argument for taxing our savings through the stock market as if we had somehow not earned this money and are unfairly, quote, rich? At what overall wealth level do you consider someone rich? We've addressed that. But let's
look, if they save their whole life and they have $5 million in the stock market, on the 6 million, they can pay some more taxes. On the 5 million plus $1, they can pay some more. I have no interest in taxing them if they have less than that.
But you want to raise the tax rates just for people who are in that top category, or do you want to raise tax rates at below $400,000 in income?
We only want to raise tax rates. So right now, I told you the top marginal income tax rate is at $622,000. It's for
right.
I mean, is it 37% for people with 622,000? Mm-hmm. We'd like to see that number at 1 million and above go to 40. Okay. Mm-hmm. But and remember, it's a marginal. So it's not, you don't pay it on everything below it. You pay that 40% on the first dollar you make over $1 million. We want to tax you higher at the first dollar you make over $1 million, and pay and tax you substantially higher as you make more than that. And we'd like to see a wealth tax and a bunch of reforms to the estate tax issue, which is where most of the people avoid the taxes with a stepped up basis. But this person who saved their money their whole life, fabulous. I think that's great. I'd love to retire with $5 million. And if I have $5 million in the bank when I retire, the day I get $5 million and $5,001, I will pay higher taxes, and I will not bitch about it. It's embarrassing. It is embarrassing to see these people gripe about taxes. And frankly, it's embarrassing to have presidential candidates run for office bragging about how low their tax rate is. Would you ever hire a CEO of your company if that CEO came in for the interview and said, boy, I invest as little in your company as is humanly possible. Why don't you put me in charge of running it?
Okay, here is another one. I'm always amazed that the federal government has unlimited funds to bail out major corporations and can game the tax system for the super wealthy, but we can never justify support for working and middle-class people, no matter how the economic system has hammered them. Morris, you spent a lot of time talking about what to do about the tax code, but how to address the issue that this questioner is raising about helping people who are not rich.
Well, I mean, he's right. We have to have a system, particularly at our state and state levels, where our governments have enough money to provide the services they need to people who actually need services. Most things are really done at the state level here in the United States. Services, it's police or fire or hospitals or unemployment insurance or all these other things. And we have to have a system where our various states tax the rich people enough so they're able to provide the services they need to make their states their states. And yeah, it's not only a tax problem, it's a problem of allocating of resources to what part of society. And we're saying we have to allocate a little bit less resources to the richest among us. That means there'll be more resources for the people that are not the richest among us. So I accept that point.
Actually, it does remind me of another issue which I meant to bring up earlier, but I'll bring it up now. And that is one very contentious part of this debate right now is what's known as the SALT tax, state and local tax deduction. And you've got lawmakers in high tax states, New York and New Jersey, that lost that deduction under the Trump tax cut, who say they want it restored. They want the deductions that the taxes that people pay in high tax states such as New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and California. They want to be able to deduct those taxes from their federal tax that was done away with under the Trump tax cut. That would seem to be a move you would applaud, Erica. So what do you say to those lawmakers, especially in New York, who are saying they're not even going to support the infrastructure proposal unless they get that tax break back?
I think that's absurd. The SALT deduction applies to the highest income people. The issue that people have, Michael, is that it was done by the Trump administration in order to be punitive to blue states who spend money.
But you applaud the move, right? Because it is a tax break, and that was eliminated by the Trump tax.
Yeah, we don't have any problem with it. And for lawmakers to go out there saying they're not going to vote for an infrastructure bill because of the SALT, because of the SALT deduction, we think that's silly. Okay. But I think the thing that you have to understand is we do have to invest in our people. And so we talk in the book about the role of local governments, state governments, and the federal government, and who has the ability to do all of these things. Now, over the long term, if we wanted to do some sort of situation where if state and local governments increased their taxes on their richest citizens in order to fund something that is relevant to the people, could you put some sort of deduction in for that? Maybe. But we disagree with those lawmakers. And the idea that you would die on the Hill for a multimillionaire not getting his tax break, I think is kind of gross.
Well, this is coming from mostly Democrats in
It
blue
is coming from
states.
Democrats, and we
Yeah.
disagree with them. Happy to
Right.
disagree with a Democrat. Listen, they've been wrong a million times before. Okay.
How to combat the argument that higher corporate taxes result in higher prices for the average consumer?
It's
Morris, you want to take that?
incorrect argument. The way that taxes work is that you have the money you take in your corporation, you subtract out the cost of making whatever it is and paying your workers, then you have left profits and you pay a percentage of that in taxes. If somebody changes the amount of the taxes up or down, that does not change how much money you take in to begin with. That changes the bottom line for the owners. They're kind of implying that how much the owners get at the end is fixed. And so if you change one expense, that means they have to change some other expense to make up for it, or change something else to make up for it. But that's not the way that companies and businesses work. Ask an actual business owner, or even ask yourself, if your expenses change, like say the grocery store has a sale on something, does that mean that your savings are fixed so you pay the dry cleaner more that week? No, not really. Or if your dry cleaner raises its prices, that means you might have less money at the end of the week, but that doesn't mean you look for something else to do differently too. So it's an incorrect argument in its face, because taxes are only paid on a percentage of profits, and profits are calculated at the end after you have sales and after you have expenses.
Michael, it's the same kind of argument they make about the job creator thing. The math, it's just, as Morris says, it's illogical on its face. Revenues, expenses, profits. Revenue is where you set the price. Expenses is where you pay your payroll. Profit that you are taxed on comes after that. If you can charge more for your good, charge more for your good. If you have to pay more people or hire another person because you have so much revenue coming in that you can't handle the onslaught of customers, hire another person. Again, plus, minus, equals profit.
If the company could make more money by charging a higher price, they would already be doing it.
Well, many are, and many are likely to in the coming months and years. Would you not get more traction for your proposal if you focused more on the 0.5% and corporations that are paying incredibly low rates? When you get to 2%, you create more foes.
I mean, 1% of earners make 1.7 million. We're basically taxing the 1%. But I mean, people, who's in the 1% is going to go up and down depending. But I mean, so that's why we just pick a number: $1 million a year, 5 million in assets. That's it.
Right. By the way, one thing we haven't addressed is just the unbelievable amounts that corporate CEOs and others at that level get paid. I think I heard today Johnson & Johnson's CEO was getting a payout with bonus of $50 million. Now, if his vaccine gets approved tomorrow, maybe people will be a little more sympathetic. We'll find out if they restore it. But how do you address the issue of the just unbelievable amounts that CEOs get paid now? Morris?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, that's not really part of what our book is about. But yeah, we've also been in favor of proposals to tax corporations a little bit more if there's a bigger disparity between the top paid people, which is not always the CEO, but between the top paid people and the median wages in that corporation. So yeah, there are efforts in California and in other places to change tax rates and charge corporations a little bit more if there's higher pay disparity from the top to the middle.
Right.
And Michael, that's because historically, CEOs made 30, 20, 30, 40 times more their average worker. The CEO of the Gap made 3,000 times more than their lowest paid worker. The CEO of McDonald's, I think it's like 2,000. I mean, come on, people. they're not that good at their jobs. You know what I'm saying? And they're not that much smarter. Their DNA is not superior to everyone else's. They basically pack their board with a bunch of their cronies. They hire outside consultants to say, well, they're paying every other CEO this much, so you have to pay me this much. And then to add insult to injury, they go around saying that they're going to create more jobs if you cut their taxes. And when you cut their taxes, they buy back their stocks, which does nothing but make the executives richer. I mean, the whole thing is a scam.
What do you want to do about the estate tax?
We would like to see the estates taxed, again, above that $1 million level. It should be taxed at the same rate of any kind of income. So why should your inheritance income that you did literally nothing for except for wait for someone to die, why on earth would we tax that less than somebody who is out there working every day for a living? So above $1 million, equalize it with ordinary income.
But you want to raise the ordinary income tax rate for high income to up to 90%. If you're a wealthy person who wants to leave an inheritance for your kids, that's going to be quite a lift or a deterrence to if they're going to face a 90% tax rate.
Yeah, so keep in mind, Michael, it's a 90% tax rate over incomes of 100 million. So if I'm sitting here in my office and my dead aunt sends me $100 million, okay, I think I can pay for that like an ordinary income. Okay. And by the way, the 90% tax rate that we're talking about only applies to incomes over $100 million. So for the first million, I'd pay 40%. For the next 5 million, I'd pay a little more. I mean, you didn't do anything to earn that money. And the person you're taking the money from is dead, so they don't care.
All right. Well, let's just close out by asking both of you what you want people to do now to sort of mobilize and put some pressure on Congress to enact some of the reforms you're talking about, because the lobbyists are going to be out there in droves resisting everything that Biden and you folks are talking about. So how do you combat that?
Well, call your congressperson, go to the chat, click on the link, order the book from Politics and Prose. When you can, go to the store in person, and then call your congressperson. Remind them that you vote, and remind them that you want the richest people among us to pay tax rates the same way that you do. That's my answer. Erica.
I think it's the same thing. Call your congressperson, force them to talk about taxes, number one. Number two, do not believe these CEOs when they go on TV and tell you that tax cuts for them are good for you, because they aren't. And number three, buy the book because it's funny and it'll help you understand all this stuff. They make it complicated on purpose. It's not that complicated.
It's certainly a easy read for people who want to understand the tax code and the tax issue. So I want to thank both Morris and Erica for a great discussion, and encourage everybody to buy the book. And I'll turn it back to Isa.
Hi. So since thank you all so much for that very spirited discussion. We appreciate your time and your energy. So we are a bookstore, so we just like to ask everyone here tonight, what are you guys currently reading? What do you want to suggest? What's on your bedside table? Anyone can answer. Oh, I meant sorry, that question was directed towards the panelists.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I am so sorry, that wasn't clear, but thank you to the audience members that are sharing their reading. But yeah, please, Mr. Pearl, Ms. Payne, or Mr. Isikoff, do share what you're reading these days.
I just got Chuck Collins' new book about hiding the wealth, actually.
Oh,
so
great.
That's what I've been reading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm rereading my Harry Potter book.
Oh, that's great.
I am. I do it whenever I'm stressed out and I'm really worried that the country's going to make the wrong decision here. And this is a grapple, y'all. The country's at stake. So when I'm not reading tax policy during the day, in the evening, Harry Potter.
And I'm a history buff, and I'm reading a new biography of one of the truly unpleasant people in the history of the United States, John Calhoun, the senator who was from South Carolina, who argued for years that slavery was a positive good for America.
Well, those all sound really great. I have to say, I've only read Harry Potter, so fantastic. But yeah, so thank you so much again. Thank you. And of course, thank you so much to the audience for being here. Your patronage is what enables us to bring you exciting events like this, and we cannot continue to host these types of events without the book sales to support them. So please support our wonderful guests and Politics and Prose by using the link in the chat to purchase Tax the Rich. Check our website for the most current updated event listings, and we have a great list to choose from. We do hope to see you all at our next events, and thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you again, Mr. Pearl, Miss Payne, and Mr. Isikoff for your time. So everyone, stay strong, stay safe, and stay well-read, and we will all see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.